year was 2020, or specifically, December 10th, 2020. The Game Awards had finally begun. Awards for games, some of which didn't come out in 2020 nor December 2019, were going to be given, and announcements were coming. Some neat stuff happened during it. Sephiroth got announced for Smash. Woo! A Ghosts and Goblins remake got announced, which is nice, since it shows Capcom still cares about their properties, and the remaining Yakuza games that weren't on PC and Xbox are now being put on PC and Xbox, so hey, now people who are enjoying the series don't have to go in the order of 0, 1, 2, and then 7. Speaking of Yakuza 7, the RPG of the Year award, the only one I cared about this year, was going to be given out, and Yakuza 7 was one of the nominees. Then the time came for the award, and the award was being given to... Here it comes! Final Fantasy 7 Remake. I mean, I had that as the runner-up that I wanted, but... It did make me wonder, though. How many people knew how truly amazing Yakuza 7 is? Sure, some people might not be into the series, and sure, FF7R had a fuck ton of hype that it brought with its release. But people wouldn't buy the literal same Persona game with some changes over a brand new amazing game that's basically done by the same company, right? Right? You better say right. So that's why I'm here today, to tell you all why if you're a Yakuza fan, an RPG fan, or just a fan of just real good games with real good plots, why this game might be a great purchase for you. I'll be splitting the video up into two specific sections, the 4 Yakuza fans section, and the 4 RPG fans section. But first, I'll also be giving a quick introduction to what this series is about, as well as a small bit of 7's plot before I get into the thick of it, so certain things make more sense for you. I plan on doing an entire video on the Yakuza series as a whole, but I think I'll save that for a later date. For now, I'll focus on 7 and show you all why I think a multitude of people could get into the series, or even just this game, with this video. I recommend listening to what I have to say for each section, but if you want to get an explanation for a specific reason first, I'll leave timestamps throughout the video. Enough of the intro though, it's about time I told you guys why this game is so damn great, and why I suggest you consider purchasing it. In Japan, tons of Yakuza, basically the Japanese mafia, are roaming the streets, the two biggest clans being the Tojo clan in Kamurocho, and the Omi alliance in Sotenbori. These two have been fighting each other for quite a long time to become the top of the top in the Yakuza clans, going to absurd lengths to do so, whether it's trying to claim a small patch of land that belongs to a blind girl, paying off the police, or just the plain and simple starting a war. They'll do whatever it takes. There's also a couple run-ins with the Chinese triads and the Korean mafia throughout the series as well. As for Yakuza 7, we have our own story starring Ichiban Kasuga, a man born in the Shangri-La soapland of Kamurocho. Having been abandoned by his mother, the manager of the soapland, Jiro Kasuga, had adopted Ichiban as his own son. Not only did the manager and the women at the soapland treat Ichiban like family, but so did a decent amount of the people of Kamurocho as well. However, the other large portion of the citizens in Kamurocho considered him, as well as everyone else in the soapland, to be complete trash. To avoid this, Ichiban often played Dragon Quest. Yes, that Dragon Quest, to hide from the harsh things people would say towards them. This eventually led Ichiban dreaming of becoming a hero, just like the heroes that exist in his Dragon Quest games. A few years had passed, and Ichiban's adoptive father had passed away, without any parental figure to look up to. Ichiban had stopped attending high school and eventually started to fight people on the street in order to obtain some money from them. One day, these fights got Ichiban into hot water when he targeted a Yakuza member. The family of said member found and captured Ichiban and planned on killing him. Ichiban, using his quick wit, remembered Yakuza member Masumi Arakawa, known as Killer Arakawa on the streets. He told his captors that if they killed him, they'd be hearing from Arakawa himself. This plan backfired, however, as the family he was dealing with happened to be enemies with Masumi. They phoned Masumi and told him to come and collect Ichiban, as well as giving some compensation for what Ichiban had done. To Ichiban's surprise, Masumi had showed up, and had even exchanged his pinky in exchange for the freedom of Ichiban. After leaving with Masumi, Ichiban attempted to thank him, but was interrupted by Masumi with a punch. Masumi has stated that he did not save Ichiban for his sake, and it was to uphold his reputation as a Yakuza. When asked why he would save someone he didn't know, Masumi responded,
さあな。俺を知ってたガキの前でカッコつけたかっただけかもな。
Ichiban had decided at that moment that he wanted to follow Masumi. He waited outside his office for 100 days in a row, no matter the weather or time, in order to join his family. Eventually, Masumi caved in and let Ichiban into the family, giving him 2 jobs, working as a member of the family and taking care of Masumi's son, Masato Arakawa, who is unable to walk. A few years later, and the date is now December 31st, 2000. Ichiban is out on his usual collections job with his sworn brother, Mitsuo Yasumura, greeting the people who raised him in Kamurocho along the way. After successfully taking the wallet, and just the wallet, of one of the people he was collecting from. He's real good at his job, I know. Ichiban is informed that he needs to go take care of Masato for the day. While bringing Masato to his girlfriend's cabaret club, due to it being her birthday, Ichiban is told to step into an alleyway with him. Masato then injects himself with an illegal ephedrine injection, and is able to walk for the rest of the evening. When they arrive at the cabaret club, Masato's girlfriend, Yumeno, isn't anywhere to be seen. She is later found at a table with a man named Juro Horinochi. Masato attempts to bribe him in order to get Yumeno at his table. However, Juro denies this and shows that he happens to be a police officer. Ichiban later goes into the washroom by himself, only to then overhear a conversation between Yumeno and Juro, mocking Masato for falling for a honey trap set up by Yumeno in order to get as much money out of him as possible. After the two leave, Ichiban then exits the stall, only to see Masato was listening to the entire conversation. He gives Ichiban a hefty amount of cash, and leaves by himself. Ichiban takes the money and shoves it into the wallet he had taken from the previous collection, so he could at least bring some money back to the family. Joe Sawashiro, the captain of the Arakawa family, realizes the money came from Masato, and tries to force Ichiban to lose a finger to pay for his mistakes, only to be stopped by Masumi, who calls Ichiban into his office. Ichiban and Masumi go around town to celebrate for the New Year's, and Masumi begins to tell Ichiban the story of how Masato was born and what caused his inability to walk. After going their separate ways for the night, Ichiban begins to drink by himself on a bench, only to then pass out and lose his wallet the morning after. Ichiban is then immediately called into the Arakawa office and is informed that Joe had killed a member of a rival family. Masumi asks Ichiban if he would be willing to take the burden of going to prison for Joe, and he accepts the request. After turning himself in, Ichiban is sentenced to 15 years in prison, only for it to be extended to 18 years after an incident in the summer of 2002. And that's all I'm gonna mention in terms of the plot for now, since I feel it's a whole lot better to go in blind from here. Now, with the context of what's going on out of the way, let's move on to why this game might be for you. Up first we have this section of the video might feel a little bit silly since, you know, I'm talking about a Yakuza game, but there should be one very big thing to note that might turn away some die-hard fans, and I want to mention a few things to possibly reel those people back in. Yakuza 7 is an RPG game, which, if you aren't aware, every entry before this had been an action-adventure game, where you'd usually go around, run into the nearest thug who doesn't like the color of your pants today, and then you promptly beat the shit out of them until they're near death because you don't kill people. Except for that one time where... Now, I'm not a huge RPG guy. I've enjoyed a decent bit, but I'm not insanely into turn-based games. The moment Sega announced that Yakuza 7 would be turn-based worried me a little bit. While I believe they could probably make a pretty fun RPG game, the series had always been an action-adventure game with the same formula, with occasional changes to spice it up a bit. This, however, wasn't some small change like giving Kiryu a Devil Trigger type of mode. This was an entire genre change. Now, what happened as a result of this big change? Well, we got a really good fucking game out of it. Despite what it changes, Yakuza 7 does a fantastic job at having things you'd expect in a Yakuza game, while also giving you a new and fresh experience for the gameplay. It still has its big action moments in the story, it still has its sub-stories that always have a real nice scenario to each and every one of them, it still has its great characters who you'll likely enjoy a decent bit, as well as the returning ones that you probably already loved. It still has its more depressing moments that can make you feel sad watching the scene transpire. It still has the feel of a Yakuza game. Even in the combat of the game, it still has its silly but almost more realistic feel to all the moves. For example, Instead of a character casting a fire spell, they instead down some alcohol and start spewing it into a lighter, causing the fire to spread in the air. Instead of casting an ice spell, they take out a big cube of ice and start shredding it towards the enemy. Instead of casting a lightning spell, they take out a phone and call down a orbital fucking laser. Another great thing for people who are already fans of the series is the setting of Yakuza 7. Yakuza 7 primarily takes place in the new location of Yokohama, which makes it pretty fun to walk around and explore the city. Just like Kamurocho and Sotenbori, all of it is based on the real-life Yokohama, which makes you realize just how amazing it all is when looking at each and every area side by side with the real one. Speaking of Kamurocho and Sotenbori, if you're a bit sad you don't get to visit those iconic cities anymore, you don't need to worry. While Yokohama may be the primary location of Yakuza 7, you'll still have your fair share of times where you'll need to go to Kamurocho or Sotenbori. Thanks to the story bringing you to those locations, you can even take a nice look at how much things have changed since you were last at both places. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention an important part of the game that's always been a series staple: minigames. You got your classics like UFO catchers and Sega arcades with Virtua Fighter 5, Super Hang-On, and Space Harrier. You got your mahjong, shogi, cabaret clubs, karaoke, darts, gambling stuff like poker and such, and the batting center. However, you also got some great new additions to the minigames as well. Golf is back and it doesn't suck like it did in Yakuza 3. You got Can Quest, which the best way I can describe it is Pac-Man, but 3D and from a third-person perspective, and also you're on a bike collecting cans. You got the new edition of the cinema minigame where you shoot down sheeps attempting to make you fall asleep in a movie theater. You got slot machines as free DLC in case you really want to gamble. You got the tests you can take at school if you really like doing homework that much. Although with that being said, the work can net you some nice personality stat raises for Ichiban, which can help status conditions, getting nice jobs, more on that later, and even open up romance options. You got business management, which is similar to the business management of Yakuza 0, but more fun and also takes a whole lot less time to finish compared to 0. However, the best addition of all is Dragon Kart, which is a pretty damn fun Yakuza version of Mario Kart. One great part of these minigames is that the points you earn off them, you can buy CDs for your save point area, so you can enjoy shit like Friday Night and Open Your Heart while you're there for a bit. Now I know what you may be thinking, but does Yakuza 7 have a Coliseum mode like the other games even though they changed the gameplay? Well, I've got a simple answer for that. It does, but much like the game itself, the Coliseum has been changed to work with the gameplay. Let's take a look back at the previous Coliseum modes for a sec. So usually with the Coliseum, it has a simple formula. You go in, the game chooses 3 people from about 10 people randomly for you to fight back to back. After beating all 3 of them, you win, and get your points that you can then spend on equipment and items. Yakuza 7 mixes it up a bit though by making it a ladder-styled Coliseum mode. There's about 30 floors to Yakuza 7's Coliseum mode, and while that may not sound like a whole lot, the floors get harder on each level, as well as the enemy types get more tricky to deal with for every level. Beating a floor will give you some real nice crafting materials, as well as some real nice equipment at the time that you unlock the Coliseum. Not only that, but the Coliseum also helps you level up your characters heavily with every floor you clear, making grinding for the current chapter you're on when you unlock the mode incredibly easy. Hopefully I managed to convince you that this game will still be pretty damn fun for you, even with the changing gameplay, and hey, if you're bummed out that there's no more action to the gameplay, you can always grab the 2 Judgment games as well, unless you're on PC, in which case I guess you're kinda fucked there for the time being. Now with that out of the way, I think it's time we moved on to the next section of the video, and that section would be... Now for people who might be really into RPGs, I've got some good news for you. Yakuza 7 is very much inspired by a whole bunch of RPGs. Stuff like Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, Pokemon. It's got a bit of the Persona UI to the combat, which makes sense considering Sega owns Atlus. That being said though, there's some things that are different than your standard RPG. Like I previously mentioned, the game does take a slightly more realistic feel to it, but not only is it different due to that, the stats that your characters have work completely different than most RPGs. Let's break them down. First, you got your HP and MP stats, which are pretty standard. HP of course determines your health, and MP determines how much magic points you can use for your skills. You have attack and defense, which are also very standard. They determine the amount of damage taken and received respectively. However, now we get into the real interesting part, how magic works in this game. As I mentioned, while there is some magic in this game, it doesn't really work in the same way as other RPGs. This goes for not only how characters use magic-like elements, but also how magic itself works in Yakuza 7. You see, magic doesn't just affect the damage of your magic-like attacks, it affects all skills. As in, anything that uses MP is affected. Anything like a character doing a big punch, a suplex, or just about anything that can deal damage that is a skill is affected by this stat, which really changes up the formula quite a bit, since you'd think it would only affect those once in a while electric or water moves that you may need, but no, this affects all of your damage with these moves. Now that being said, it doesn't really amount to a huge difference with the stat being lower or higher. The only real way to notice a major difference is if you dump a whole bunch of points into it. Next up is healing, which really is a great stat and all, but there's only 2 people in your party who you really want as a healer because honestly everyone else isn't going to do it that well. Then we have agility, which is another very interesting stat. As you would expect, agility determines the combat order of a battle, but it can go even further than that, since it also can determine the number of moves you can make. You have a good agility stat? You get to move first, sure, but you get 1 attack. A little more? You get to do 2 attacks, twice the damage. Even more? 3. So on, and so forth. Multiply that by all your party members and you can absolutely dominate the battlefield. Now, of course, as you continue through the game, your opponents will also get higher agility stats, decreasing the odds that you can get more than 1. However, for the amount of time where you can get those additional attacks, it can really change things, especially for boss fights early on. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's move on to our final stat. Dexterity. Dexterity is also a pretty important stat, of course, as it determines both your hit rate and also dodge rate. Raising your dexterity, however, can be quite good, since some debuffs can be dodged thanks to it, making fights slightly less of a hassle sometimes. Now that we have the stats out of the way, we can move on to the next section, the job system. If you were wondering, yes, Yakuza 7 happens to have a job system to it. To start this, I'll mention that every character has a specific job to them and just them. These being freelancer, hero, homeless guy, detective, barmaid, hitman, gangster, and clerk. With that mentioned, we can focus now on the jobs that every character can change into. For male characters specifically, you've got Breaker, which is a job with high agility, Host, which excels at using water moves, Enforcer, which is pretty much the tank class, Foreman, which is a nice jack-of-all-trades type of job, Fortune Teller, which is a good support class and also has the best electric magic by far, with the exclusion of a certain large MP wasting move that does absurd amounts. Chef, which is the opposite of Host, aka they're good with fire. Bodyguard, which is a job that pretty much sacrifices some of the character's HP in order to hit the opponent harder. Musician, who is basically your bard job for the game. And a DLC class known as Devil Rocker, which is a real good job for anything. However, I wouldn't recommend using this one for the early game as you'll have limited options for equipment. For the female characters, you've got Idol Job, which is basically a healer. Give this to Psycho, give this to Psycho, give this to Psycho! Hostess is your best option for an all-around class for female characters. Night Queen is basically your battle-focused job, if you don't have DLC. Dealer, which is my favorite fucking job in the entire game because it relies on RNG, which makes it both funny and also a real great moment when the odds are in your favor. And the DLC job of Matriarch, which is just a better battle-focused job than Night Queen. Now that I've talked about all the jobs, we can finally talk about the combat. So, here's the thing. Yakuza 7's combat, like I mentioned, takes a more realistic feel to itself. The combat is overall basic in terms of RPGs, however there's a few things to mention that can make it new. The first thing to mention is that the combat takes place in a 3D space, which of course, changes how certain things work. After an enemy is knocked down, either from a basic attack or a skill, you can use a basic attack while they're on the ground for a guaranteed critical, which can really help for boss battles where you might not have a whole lot of MP left, but need to get some good damage out. Speaking of getting some extra damage out to enemies while they're on the floor, there's also follow-up attacks. When an enemy is knocked down by somebody using a basic attack, one of your allies might automatically follow up with an extra attack for free without the use of their turn. Now this does come with a few circumstances. For one, your partner needs to be relatively near the fallen enemy, and the other circumstance, albeit the attack could still occur at level 1, but depending on the bond level you have with that ally, it raises the chance of it happening, with 5 being almost guaranteed that it will happen. There's also the mechanic where if anything is in your team's way, or the enemy's way, they will often kick it in some direction. If somebody is hit by this, of course, then they will receive damage, letting you get some extra hurt on the opponent you're fighting, or possibly the other enemies on the sidelines. Of course, this mechanic, like I mentioned, can also be used against you, so you should make sure that you can guard the attack if you see it coming. There is one slight difference to this mechanic, however, depending on the specific job, and that's Ichiban. If Ichiban is a freelancer class, and he happens to be near one of these items, he'll pick it up and start smacking the opponent with it, dealing more damage than the regular kick towards somebody would do. Not everything is in your favor though. If you target an enemy with another one in the way, there's a good chance that the one in the way will attempt to strike you while you charge towards the one in the back. If you are hit by this enemy, then not only will you take a bit of damage, but also your turn will be skipped altogether. So you gotta think about who you're targeting before actually doing the attack. Overall, everything else is the same as other RPGs. There's even a summon system in it, but I won't go into that to avoid the big surprises of it. However, there is one other simple thing I'd like to mention. As you can guess, this game does have a bit of grinding to it, which can really be a bitch sometimes. However, there is a simple solution to this that isn't really all that uncommon, but it is nice, and that's the auto battle feature. With this, you can just let the game play itself, with 4 settings that decide how your characters will handle the battle. It's not super insane or anything, but it is a very handy feature to have. Now I could keep going with this stuff. I could talk about the status effects in this game, the slightly unique ones it has, the incredibly helpful crafting system for weapons and armor, where you can not only make new stuff, but also upgrade a whole bunch of things. Please upgrade your equipment, I swear it will really fucking help. However, I think I've mentioned the most important parts for people interested in the gameplay of the game. With that said though, there's one more thing. One last area of the video that I'd like to go over before ending this whole thing off. Throughout this video, I mentioned parts where I felt Yakuza fans and RPG fans would love this game, but there's one more thing I want to add. This game could really be for anyone. I know that doesn't sound weird or anything. After all, a taste for the series has to start somewhere. However, this point is for me to basically say that this could be your starting point. This game has a whole bunch of amazing shit to it. A fantastic story that can make you feel every sort of emotion. Gameplay that's basic but also unique in a way that makes it really enjoyable. A fantastic soundtrack slapped onto it that really helps set the mood for every moment. And great voice acting for both English and Japanese dubs of the game. I streamed this game from the day it came out till the start of December after playing every single mainline Yakuza game for a marathon. Even after the entire marathon. Even after thinking that the 2nd and 5th game were the absolute top and it would be incredibly hard to top them due to their amazing stories, great characters, and fun gameplay, somehow 7 still surpassed them. Somehow I loved 7 way more than everything else. There was so much there that I had the biggest smile on my face while going through it and seeing all the goofy moments, the more serious moments, even the sad moments of the game where I'll fully admit made me tear up a bit. This game is seriously a complete gem, and I genuinely hope that if you can, please give it a try. It's completely worth the full price, and hey, if you see it's on sale, that's a steal for you. I really hope that you'll consider trying Yakuza 7, or as we know it, Yakuza Like a Dragon. thank you all so much for watching this video. It really means a lot to me if you stuck around all the way through to see this whole thing to the end and hear what I had to say about Yakuza 7. I also really want to thank King Shitpost, or Raichuius, whatever name he wants to go by, whatever. His link to his channel will be in the description below. He sometimes makes some funny little videos. They're short, but they're funny most of the time. And also, he really did help a whole lot with this video. If it weren't for him, I don't think this video would be as good as it is. And honestly, this video took a while. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but I started the idea of this kinda after I was done the Yakuza 7 streams, which was around December. And now we are almost in December again, except 2021. But this video has been in the works since around January, and I kinda was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with it for a large portion of this time. I was trying to figure out what way I wanted to tackle this. I was going to tackle the series altogether at one point, but I felt like that'd be a bit much. I would have to write a whole lot for this video, and it would be a whole lot longer than this. Then I thought about, okay, we can just be direct and focus on Yakuza 7. But while I thought about that idea, I didn't know entirely how I wanted to approach this, until, of course, I found out, you know what, I want to approach this the way I did with this video now, where I, split it up into these sections, give you all the lowdown of how it is, and all that, and it works a whole lot better than possibly just going through the entire series and just listing off the story points and listing off the gameplay and all that. I felt like it worked a whole lot better than that, and I'm hoping it was a whole lot better for all of you than the idea of that. Now, with this done, I'm definitely going to do more of these. I definitely want to try and possibly pique somebody's interests into the stuff that I'm interested into, and definitely make these big videos where I just talk about all the things that really work for each of these series. And I even have a teaser at the end of this video. You just wait till I'm done speaking, and I'll present the teaser, of course. But I have a teaser at the end of this video for the next one I'm gonna do. It might take a bit longer than this one, just because I've had this, all the Yakuza stuff ready for a while now. It's just a matter of I was trying to figure out how I wanted to do it, writing it down, and writing all my ideas and trying to think of stuff did take a bit and everything, and I wasn't sure, and there was a lot of the times where I, thought maybe I want to cancel it, except I've done this so much with some of the bigger stuff that I've tried to do on the channel that I didn't really want to cancel this at all. I was really passionate about this, and I'm very passionate about the next thing I'm going to talk about. But yeah, I would definitely want to make this into a series where I can just tell you all about these things. But first, I'm going to try and get some Jackbox highlights out, like I mentioned previously. So there'll be some Jackbox highlights out, possibly some more Mario highlights. I'm thinking about doing that. That might be after the next video, I don't know. But I want to get those two things out probably, and then I'll have the next Get Into video. It's going to be a very big one. I'm going to have a whole lot to talk about with that one. It might not be super long, but I think it'll definitely be longer than this, I feel. And yeah, it's going to be something that I personally think a whole lot of people might be interested in. Maybe not. Maybe I might change your viewpoint of it, who knows. But for now, that's all of this video. So thank you all so much for watching. It really means a whole lot to me that you all stuck the whole way through for this and heard me out on all of it. And yeah, I think it's time to play the teaser of the next one. And hey, if you recognize it, maybe you know what's coming. Maybe. But without further ado, here's the teaser.